All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving headfirst into the fascinating world of terraforming Mars.
Yeah, we're talking about turning that red, dusty, wasteland into a place where humans could actually, live.
Yeah, walk on a Martian beach someday, can you imagine?
I mean, it's mind-blowing, right?
Totally. And honestly, who isn't at least a little bit curious about this stuff? We've got a whole bunch of cool videos and articles we're going to be pulling from today, like PBS Spacetime, Kurskasak, some other documentaries. Even Neil deGrasse Tyson chimes in at some point.
Oh, yeah, he always has something interesting to say.
Right, so we're going to try to cover it all, the science behind it, how crazy hard it would be, the whole shebang.
And to, really get into how we could do it, it helps to understand why is Mars the way it is in the first place?
Yeah, good point. I mean, was it always a cold, dry desert?
Actually, no. Billions of years ago, Mars was way more Earth-like. Think thicker atmosphere, warmer climate.
Wait, are we talking like oceans and rivers? Seriously?
You got it. We even think it had flowing water. There's even a chance early Mars could have supported, life.
Whoa, that's insane. So what happened? Where did it all go?
Basically, over a super long time, Mars lost a huge chunk of its atmosphere, and that's a big part of why it's so different from Earth now.
Right.
And one of the most important things it lost was, carbon dioxide, CO2.
Yeah, right. That greenhouse gas we're always talking about.
Exactly. And without enough CO2 to trap heat, Mars just, cooled down and dried up.
So is that CO2, gone forever? Or is it hiding somewhere?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Scientists are still trying to figure that out.
So it's like a missing piece of the puzzle then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to terraform Mars, wouldn't it be great to find all that CO2?
Yeah, but even if we did, it's not like we can just, wave a magic wand and poof, it's back in the atmosphere, right?
True. It's definitely not that easy. But scientists have come up with some pretty wild ideas, to try and kickstart this whole warming up process. One idea is introducing super greenhouse gases.
Super greenhouse gases. So CO2, but way more powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One example is perfluorocarbons, or PFCs. They're super good at trapping heat, so even a small amount could have a big warming effect.
Okay, that's pretty cool, but wouldn't we have to make a ton of this stuff and then ship it all the way to Mars?
Yeah, it would be a massive project for sure.
Yeah.
But there are other ideas too, remember those giant mirrors in space from sci-fi movies?
Oh yeah, focusing sunlight onto Mars.
Exactly. Some scientists think we could actually build those and use them to heat up the surface.
Okay, that's pretty epic, but also sounds insanely complicated. Are we talking Death Star levels of engineering here?
It would definitely be a super complex project,
Right.
pushing the limits of what we can do, yeah.
I can only imagine the cost.
Yeah.
Are there any other maybe more out there solutions people have talked about?
Well, there's one that's pretty controversial, the idea of nuking the Martian poles.
Hold on, are we talking about actually detonating nuclear weapons on Mars?
It's definitely a controversial idea, but yeah, the thought is that the explosions would vaporize the frozen CO2 in the ice caps and release it into the atmosphere.
Yeah, I bet there are some ethical and environmental concerns with that approach, but even if, for argument's sake, we could actually warm up Mars, that still doesn't make it habitable, right? What about breathable air and all that?
Right, you're 100% correct. Warming up the planet is really just the first step. There's a whole lot more to think about when it comes to making Mars a place where humans could actually live.
So we've warmed it up, now we got to figure out the rest. We'll dive into that next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive on terraforming Mars. Last time we were talking about how to warm up the planet, and we got to some, pretty wild ideas.
Yeah, super greenhouse gases, giant space mirrors, even, nuking the poles. Definitely some stuff to think about, but let's just say for a minute that we figured out how to make Mars warmer.
Okay.
We still can't just, kick back on a Martian beach, right?
Not quite, no.
Yeah.
Even with a warmer climate, there's a lot more we need to figure out before Mars could really support, human life.
Yeah, breathable air, clean water, and didn't we talk about there being a ton more radiation on Mars than on Earth?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Mars doesn't have that protective magnetic field that Earth has.
Right. Okay, so even if we warmed things up, it'd still be pretty harsh. And speaking of harsh, what about the effects on, us? If humans were living on Mars, long term, our bodies would probably start to adapt, right? Would we even look the same?
That's a really interesting question. Living on Mars would for sure lead to some pretty big evolutionary changes. Think about gravity, for instance. Mars has way less gravity than Earth.
Oh, yeah, like how astronauts kind of bounce around on the moon.
Right, exactly. Now imagine generations of humans growing up in that low-gravity environment, their bones would probably become less dense.
So, like, they'd be taller but kind of weaker.
Yeah, potentially. Taller, thinner bones.
Wow, that's crazy. Anything else? What about, like, skin color? Would we turn green?
Well, probably not green, but there's a chance Martians could have get this orange skin.
Wait, orange? Seriously? Okay, gotta explain that one.
Well, remember all that radiation on Mars we were talking about? Our bodies would need a way to deal with that, right? And one way could be by evolving higher levels of carotenoids in our skin.
Carotenoids. Those are like the things that make carrots orange, right?
Exactly. And they can act like a natural sunscreen, protecting us from, harmful radiation.
So basically it would be like giant walking carrots.
Not exactly. But yeah, Martian skin could have an orange tint from all those carotenoids.
Okay, that's wild. Anything else? Would we all need glasses?
It's possible. Think about it. If generations of humans are living in, enclosed habitats on Mars, they wouldn't really need to see things far away.
Right, so their vision would adapt to that.
Exactly. Nearsightedness could become way more common.
So future Martians, tall, skinny, orange skin, can't see too far. That's a pretty unique look. But even if we could do all this, even if we could terraform Mars and adapt to living there, should we?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
Like, maybe we should be focusing on fixing things here on Earth, right?
That's a debate a lot of people are having. Terraforming Mars would be the ultimate mega project, right? We're talking generations of work, global cooperation, crazy new technologies.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee it would even work. So why even bother? What would be the point?
Well, one big argument is that it would give humanity a backup planet, just in case something catastrophic happened to Earth.
A backup planet. So like if an asteroid hit or something?
Exactly. Or, a supervolcano, even things we're doing ourselves, like climate change or, nuclear war.
Right. A cosmic insurance policy.
Exactly. Having a self-sustaining colony on another planet could be our, safety net.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how that would be a pretty good reason. Anything else aside from just, survival?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just imagine the scientific and technological advances that would come from something like this.
Right. It would push the boundaries of, everything.
Exactly. And who knows what we'd discover on Mars? There's still so much we don't know about its past. We might even find evidence of, ancient life.
That would be amazing. But, we got to think about the ethics of all this, too.
Yeah, definitely.
Bringing Earth life to another planet, that's a big deal, right? Like, what if there's already, microscopic life on Mars?
You're right. It's a really important consideration. We'd essentially be shaping the destiny of a whole planet.
Yeah, and we don't want to repeat the same mistakes we've made on Earth, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a chance to do things differently, to build a new kind of society, one that's, more sustainable and cooperative.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've talked about the science, the technology, the ethics, but what about the politics of all this?
Yes, the politics. That's a whole other can of worms. We'll dive into that next time as we wrap up this deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. So you've talked about all the cool science and the crazy challenges of terraforming Mars, how humans might adapt, even the ethical dilemmas.
Right, you've covered a lot of ground.
But there's one big piece of the puzzle we haven't really talked about yet, and that's, the politics.
Oh, yeah, the politics of it all. That's a whole other layer of complexity.
Exactly. I mean, we're potentially talking about creating a whole new world here. Who gets to decide what happens on Mars?
Right. It's like a giant new frontier, but on a planetary scale. And historically, new frontiers always lead to, questions of ownership and control.
Yeah, who gets to rule it? Who makes the laws?
And in space, it gets even more complicated, right? We have to consider those international treaties, the role of, private companies, and the potential for conflict.
Yeah, that's a lot. So let's start with the basics. Who owns Mars right now? Is it just, finders keepers?
Well, not quite. There's this agreement called the Outer Space Treaty, signed back in 1967. And it basically says that no single nation can, claim ownership of planets or moons.
So it's kind of like international waters, then.
In some ways, yeah. The treaty emphasizes that space is for everyone and should be used peacefully.
So no one can just, plant their flag on Mars and say, this is mine.
Exactly. But here's where things get a little tricky. The treaty was written during the Cold War, so it was really focused on nation-states.
Yeah, and now we have all these private companies getting involved in space.
Right, like SpaceX and Blue Origin. They're investing billions in technology to get to Mars and even, build settlements there.
Okay, so where do they fit in? Does the treaty say anything about private companies owning stuff on other planets?
That's a big question, and it's still being debated. The treaty doesn't really address private ownership or, commercial activities in space.
So some people are saying companies should be able to claim resources they extract from Mars.
Yeah, some companies believe they should have that right, which raises all sorts of interesting questions.
Like, could we end up with, like, corporations owning parts of Mars?
It's definitely a possibility we have to think about. Imagine a future where you have companies mining resources, building habitats, essentially operating like, independent entities on another planet.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like a science fiction dystopia, to be honest. And wouldn't that, like, lead to conflict?
That's a real concern. What happens when different companies or even different countries want the same resources or, the best spots on Mars? Who gets to decide?
Right, it's a big mess waiting to happen. So how do we avoid all this? Like, how do we make sure things are fair and sustainable?
Well, that's the challenge, right? We need to come up with some kind of legal and ethical framework for, developing Mars responsibly.
We don't want to just repeat all the same mistakes we've made here on Earth.
Exactly. We have a chance to do things differently on Mars, to build a new kind of society based on, cooperation and respect for the environment.
That sounds pretty idealistic, but also incredibly hard to pull off. Like, how do we get everyone to agree on this?
It's definitely a challenge, no doubt, but I think it's also a huge opportunity, Exploring and settling Mars forces us to think bigger, to think about the future of humanity as a whole.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective. It's not just about building rockets and habitats. It's about, like, creating a whole new chapter in human history.
Exactly. And ultimately, the future of Mars, and maybe even humanity's future out there in the stars, depends on the choices we make today.
So it all comes back to us, right? We've explored the science, the tech, the ethics, the politics.
Yeah.
But it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create, both on Mars and here on Earth.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. And we hope this deep dive has given you some, food for thought. Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining us.